Today, Europe might be standing at the crossroads of a new care paradigm shift with the European Commission's new care strategy, which was launched almost a year ago and in between very swiftly endorsed at the Council level. By taking leadership in this still underexplored policy area, the European Union may take a more proactive approach to rebalance persisting inequalities attributable to the neglect of care. The true question here lies, however, in how this recognition translates into wide-reaching answers addressing the challenges faced by individuals whose situations are as diverse as Europe itself. The European Union is playing has a crucial responsibility to play in initiating this transformative shift towards a change of social and gender norms, and at the same time incentivizing public investments in care. And that is precisely why SFEPS, the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, together with FAS, the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, and EPSU, the European Federation of Public Services, we are delighted to join forces in the context of the present policy series, looking exclusively into care policy in the European Union context. So therefore, this Care for Care policy series will offer a set of policy-oriented discussions highlighting the persisting challenges related to care policy making and the opportunities this can bring forth. Care being such a complex and interconnected policy field, every webinar from the series will look at different dimensions relevant to understanding how the strategy can give itself the means to ensure that caregivers and care receivers do not fall short of the EU's fundamental values. How are we going to do this? Well, we will do that in a two-step approach. Firstly, we will be looking into relevant insights that will be presented based on our policy study that is precisely analyzing the care strategy across the different domains. The policy study namely seeks to critically assess whether the strategy can be seized as an opportunity to trigger a new approach to care. This short presentation is first and foremost the means to feed and offer in a second step the very first impulse and follow-up discussion. That is when we aim to bring in conversation our invited expert speakers who will be discussing the different policy challenges and concrete ways forward, thanks to the participation of our experts around the table. And so this discussion will be moderated by Paola Panzeri, who is a policy staff on gender equality, local and regional governments, and also representing one of our partners in this project. Considering that the European care strategy has a very strong emphasis on early childhood education and care, including the Council recommendation on the revision of the Barcelona targets, this very first edition of our care series is interested more particularly in this very aspect related to childcare provision. And more precisely, we will assess the current state of play before our invited guests will engage on how to ensure that the EU's new targets are within reach. And so considering the high level of feminization and undervaluing of the childcare sector that it is still suffering, our speakers will in particular engage on how quality childcare goes hand in hand with ensuring fair working conditions and adequate financing. The audience, of course, is very welcome to interact with us, and more specifically through our YouTube live channel, where you can ask direct questions to our speakers, and they will also immediately appear on the screen. So we warmly invite you and encourage you to engage with us through this channel. So now I'm going to share the presentation, starting the first part of this program, hoping that you can all see it. And so, indeed, as mentioned earlier, we wanted to start this seminar by bringing forth and feeding the discussion with some insights of our policy study, and more particularly with those that relate to early childhood education and care. In order to also facilitate the pronunciation, I will also perhaps refer more frequently to childcare or ECEC, simply to avoid the long appellation. But it's obvious that what we we are referring to here is always early childhood education and care. And more particularly, we'll be building on the chapter by Anna Gromada, who is the co-foundress of the Kaleki Foundation, and where she also makes a strong case for ensuring universal access to childcare. At the same time, I also encourage you to look at the different and other chapters of the policy study, which equally place important emphasis on the issue of childcare, but sometimes also from different dimensions. What, for instance, what it means for children with a disability, or what it means from a workers' rights perspective, and so on and so forth. And so even before the COVID-19 pandemic started, some EU countries were failing to offer comprehensive childcare provision to all families. And this was often reflecting their very own policy priorities rather than available resources. In ways that are comparable to the shift operated in the 19th century with universal access to primary education across Europe, Anna Gromada is namely calling on EU countries to lead the way in extending the right to education to younger children with direct benefits for them, their caregivers, and society. And so that is what the next slide is actually showing you. Because obviously the first and foremost argument for universal access to childcare are children's well-being. Interactions with peers enhance social, emotional, and behavioral development, giving children competence they can use in life and school. But also, this is an important factor in order to reduce inequalities. In fact, high-income households are almost twice as likely to use formal care for children under 3. This is problematic given the high equalizing potential of high-quality childcare, especially when it comes to preventing children from disadvantaged backgrounds from falling behind. The dimension of disadvantage also tend to overlap. Not only are we speaking of disadvantages between children and their parents, but also between different areas and regions of Europe, where we saw, for instance, a concrete case of Poland that was suffering a severe lack of childcare provision that was also named that was known as the childcare deserts phenomena, and we saw that, for instance, as many as 91% of rural communes did not have a single institution for children at this age, meaning that parents outside the urban areas could not use childcare regardless of its price and quality. The third factor is, of course, gender equality and work-life balance. Despite the important progress in gender equality, women still carry a large and disproportionate share of care responsibilities. In the European Union, as many as 90% of the formal care workforce is made up of women, and that includes 97% of childcare teachers, which is also making it a highly feminized sector. And that is, for instance, something also that is further developed in the chapter on working conditions by Tuscany Bell later on in the report. And what we also see in addition to that is that almost 8 million women are out of employment because of care responsibilities. This also comes on top of the increasing scale of single parenthood, the majority of which are also women. The fourth factor also concerns demographic challenges. The European Union is facing a demographic crisis. It has a sub-replacement fertility rate of 1.5 children per woman, and this rate is even lower in other countries like Italy and Spain. In most EU countries, people would like to have more children, but they don't because of the highly incompatible choices that are imposed on them due to the modern work patterns. And so good social policy would mitigate these conflicts whilst also respecting individual freedoms at the same time. And last but not least, we have to acknowledge the benefits for society as a whole. High-quality childcare keeps on giving, and it is directly connected to better academic opportunities, higher income, better health, lower possibility of using welfare, committing to crime, and ending up in prison, for instance. And all of these factors have been well understood by the European Commission that came up with its care strategy, which is offering an important opportunity to move in the right direction. But at the same time, this path is not without obstacles in the way, and which will be at the heart of the discussion that we are going to have now in just a few minutes with our speakers. When it comes now to access, we see that in most countries, and that is what we see on the next slide is that access does not start until the child is 3 years old. However, that free access averages 25 hours weekly, which is highly incompatible with full-time employment. And so in the European Union, 59% of mothers with at least one child are employed, but then those rates are highly diverse according to the different countries, where we see that this rate is, for instance, 16% in Hungary and up to 82% in Sweden. And so that is also one of the reasons why, together with FAS, FEPS has launched the Care Atlas, which is precisely showing the interconnection between the different gender gaps and women's activity in the employment market, but also their overrepresentation in forced part-time work, where we see, for instance, here one of the examples, which is the Netherlands, that has the highest share of female part-time workers in Europe. Now, in the next slide, we also look at the enrollment rates. Over the past decades in the European Union, enrollment increased by almost a third, raising from 28 to 36% for children under 3. At the same time, however, the next slide is also showing us that this low employment typically means that the more privileged you are, the more likely it is that you're going to use childcare. And that is something that I'm sure speakers and our discussants will be referring back to. In the European Union, formal childcare for the under 3 years olds was attended by 28% of children from low-income households, against 38% of children from middle-income households and 45% from high-income households. And so in practice, increasing access to childcare means creating more opportunities primarily for those from disadvantaged backgrounds. Now, when it comes to affordability, we see that over the past decades, EU childcare has become more affordable. For a couple on 2 average wages, the burden fell slightly from 13% on one salary in 2004 to 11% in 2021. Still, this also marks huge disparities across countries, with very significant divergences across country, and where we see, for instance, the example of Czech Republic, where parents would need to spend still about a third of their average salary. And the EU states on average spend 0.6 of GDP on the care of children aged 3 to 5. But compared to higher levels of education, childcare, and that is very important to note, is still much more dependent on decentralized funding, with 43% of it relying on public funding that came from the local, 14% from the regional, and 43% from the central government. This also comes on top of private funding, ranging from 7% in Slovenia, for instance, and 100% in Ireland. Now, when it comes to quality, we see that care quality, or it should be mentioned, should be stressed that care quality is best measured by outcomes, such as the child's social, emotional, and cognitive skills. Yet, due to a lack of updated comparable data allowing us to measure this, we mostly focus on inputs such as staff qualification and children to staff ratio. And what we see here is that only 11 countries report this ratio for childcare. So it can range from 3 children per caregiver in Norway, the UK, Iceland, and Denmark, to 4 in Germany and Finland. And that is something that I'm sure that Leena Kaasinen from Finland will also be able to develop it a bit more in her intervention. It also consists of 5 ratio. We have a ratio of 5 in Sweden and Slovenia, 6 in Austria and Lithuania, and up to 14 in Hungary. On top of this, what is also quite important to note is the connection with ideological views. At national level, ideological views about childcare are strongly related to the enrollment of children under 3, but weakly related to the enrollment of older children. And so that is how in 2016, about half of parents of children under 3 reported no need for childcare, a share that is largely under-related to the current enrollment rates. And so this declaration reflects parental preferences, the availability of informal care, but also ideological differences in childcare styles. So these are some of the main elements that are identified in the chapter on childcare, which also the author summarizes or concludes with a set of concrete policy recommendations. What can be drawn here, and I invite you to look into the details in the report, is nevertheless that higher childcare enrollment has been typically reached by a mix of legal and financial support. And so the legal right for children over the age of 1 came into force, for instance, in Norway in 2009 and in Germany in 2013, and most recently in the UK in 2023. Yet, legal access remains empty if it is not backed by money. So these are some of the main messages that I hope will enable to feed the conversation, and that is how I would like to now immediately, without further ado, hand over to Paola. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Laeticia, for the presentation. And also on behalf of EPSU, the European Public Service Unions, I would like to welcome you all to this event. My name is Paola Panzeri, and I work for EPSU as Policy Officer for local and regional governments, but also I deal with all the policies relating to gender equality in the Federation. I won't take it too much time here. I just wanted to remind the participants that you can interact with us. So you can ask questions to the speakers and the discussants as well via the chat of the Zoom or also via YouTube channel. So please feel free to do that. It will be a much more interactive session if you do. So don't hesitate to interact with us. But without taking any other time from the discussants, I will go through with the next session. The first speaker I would like to bring in, the first discussant I would like to bring in is Christian. I don't know if yes, we see Christian there. Christian is a researcher and a consultant, has been working on for many years on these files, and I think one of the things that you've worked a lot from our previous discussions is what make this framework that we heard about achievable. So these are the numbers, the budget, the money. So my first question to you would be, from your work and experience, would you say that the money on the table is enough to ensure fair working conditions in childcare? And as we heard Laeticia mentioning the issue of a lot of paradigm shift, a lot of new initiatives that could bring change. So my question is, the EU has put forward the child guarantee and injected money with the RFF. Are these investments and initiatives sufficient? And are they, the impact of this will actually enable every child to have the right to childcare, but also workers to have fair working conditions? Christian, the floor is yours.
A lot of, okay, first, money sufficient, let's say. No, it is not. Let me show you rapidly a slide, if I can. Can we show a slide? Here we go. That's official OECD data. So this is about early childhood care and education, meaning childcare and preschool. So you already see that only few countries surpasses 1% of GDP on spending for, let's say, education and care policy for 0 to 6. The problem is that if you see in the bars, the blue part is childcare. So there are really fewer of them that spend, let's say, more or less the same amount for preschool and childcare. Most of them basically spend the little that we have, so less than 1%, mostly on preschool education. That's the main reason why childcare is so limited. It is basically underfunded. But Laeticia would like another interesting aspect. It is not only about the total fund available, is also how the funds are distributed, because this is a highly decentralized policy. So municipalities have it's I mean, quite bizarre, because these are policies in which you set goals at European level, for instance, with the care strategy that you have to reach a certain amount of coverage at national level, but then those that have to implement it are at local level. Implementing meaning delivering the service, but also mostly finance the services. Let me show you the second slide that is interesting. That's something that is extracted from an OECD from another OECD paper. So, I mean, I'm not going to, it's a bit complicated to explain, but I'll rapidly tell you. Basically the red dot is what a municipality puts in this kind of policies by their own. And the blue one is the transfer from the government. You will see that only in very few cases the transfer are, kind of consistent. In most of the cases, the transfer are practically inexisting. So what's going on? You establish a policy at national level, but you give the responsibility to deliver the policy to municipality with basically little or no money in most of the cases. So the government does not transfer to. What does it mean? Why is important, that aspect? Because how a municipality can fund the money then? Because we are talking about service that are, if they are quality service, quite costly. I mean, give you an example of Italy. That is a country, not certainly the country with the highest GDP per capita in the EU, but a cost of a child per year in a quality childcare is 9,000 euros. So imagine for a small municipality, it's a big budget if you add all the children there. So how can they face this cost since the government does not transfer enough? Well, the first thing they can do is basically not doing services. That's what's happening, most of the time. So the second thing is, if you're a municipality with affluent people living in, then you can ask parental contribution. So the fees can be high, and even if they're established according to the income, but of course, since the family have more income, the municipality also have more money to finance this service, or can raise local taxation. That's the alternative. But what about municipalities in which you have middle class people, so that they pay according to the fees, according to their income, and therefore they're few. The fees are limited. What they can do, but there's a third alternative, unfortunately, and it comes to the issue of workers, which is they can reduce quality, because quality costs. And the cost of quality is basically the cost of labor and workers. So the thing they can do is they basically play with workers' salaries, for instance. They can low down at the minimum level established with standard the salary of the staff. They can play with the ratio of the staff and the pupils. So they can higher the ratio and lower the cost. They can also use the staff, for instance, for administrative staff be employed in educational task. So they have different potential modalities to do it. And of course, the ideal is to then, in order to do it more easily, is to give the management of this service to non-public institutions. It could be also non-profit, but they don't follow the same rules, so they can lower cost, especially by doing different type of contract for the workers, like using a lot the VAT contract, for instance, for them, very unsecured. So I mean, the matter of funding, if you go from up to the bottom, you see that the main issue is that at the end of the day, you have less service in the area where they are most needed. So they are family with middle low income living, because municipality have not enough funds, and or you have service of low quality for the same reason, because quality is a cost, and then they can reduce costs through that. Or you can find private, but it's only in certain area. So that's the thing. You say, okay, but there are European initiative. We saw that.
Maybe Christian, what I would do now, if you agree with me, we can leave the European a bit for later, and I will bring in Rainer from a municipality or from a Austrian region. Would that be agreeable with you? Okay,
absolutely.
Let's proceed, because you mentioned indeed the dilemma, if I can call it like that, of municipality. Yeah. What do? We don't have enough money. They ask us to deliver a service, but then nobody gives us the opportunity to enable us to deliver that service. So from this, then I will bring in Rainer from Austria to also tell us a bit how's the situation in Austria, and how's the situation on the ground. Not Leena. Yes, Rainer. Apologies if I pronounce your name and the name of your region, Burgenland, wrongly. bear with my non-German pronunciation. But how's the situation on the ground? Also, can you set the scene a bit, your region, so we understand a bit better for non-Austrian people, non-familiar with Austrian framework? How does it work, and what's the situation on the ground?
Yeah, thank you, Paola, and you pronounced it almost perfectly. So, thank you very much, and honor and pleasure to be here. And as you maybe have seen on the program, it was foreseen that our member of our regional government, Mr. Dorner, was supposed to be here due to unforeseen circumstances. He could not make it, so I have to fill in for him, and he was foreseen to take part in this interesting discussion because he was the rapporteur in the Committee of the Regions for the European Care Strategy. And care is one of our top local policy priorities in the region of Burgenland. And I will maybe line out a bit why this is the case and what we do to bring it to life, so to speak, this high political priority. We saw on the graphs which were just presented by Christian that Austria, in principle, is not a big role model when it comes to care and early childhood care. We are always like even below the EU average, and we, as like a progressive thinking region, try to really make the situation better. And we just heard about like the wages and what care workers earn. So in Burgenland, we have established a minimum wage system for everybody who is employed in the municipalities, and this is at the moment like 3,000 euro netto, so after taxes, 2,000 euro netto after taxes for everybody. So this is how we want to address this problem that we don't have enough workers who work there, and we don't have enough quality, because the quality is also very, very important thing, obviously. So I think this is how we really improve the situation for the care workers on the ground. And of course, it's a question of financing, but financing is always a question also of political priorities. And as I just said, it is a high and big political priority for us. We just of course, we could not face the municipalities to force the municipalities to do this. It is, of course, on their free will, for example. But out of our 171 municipalities, 138 had already implied this system of this minimum wage. So we are really proud of that. On the other hand, we try to, or it is the position of the region, that in principle care is a public service, and it, of course, even if it's provided by private sector companies or private groups whatsoever, we really try to force them not to make profits. And if they make profits, they have to reinvest it in the quality of the installation itself. So we should not end up in like providing a service where people have to pay, and then they make profits and invest these profits in something else, because as we see it, it's a task for the public sector to provide this. And we are also like proud that, because I just talked about the payment, that in principle, since the November 2019, these installations for early childcare and also kindergartens are completely free of charge in Burgenland. So, and this is a way where we really try to improve the situation for the young families, and especially for women, as we heard, because it's mostly women who provide this informal service at home, and then we don't have them don't have the chance to participate fully in the labor market. And this is how we really want to address these to empower women to participate in the labor market with the same chances as most of the men have. So I think I will stop here for the moment. So as I said, quality is important. Quality you get with the minimum wages, and we also are proud to present it free of charge, so that nobody has an excuse that he cannot afford it, so to speak, to empower mostly women with this approach. Thanks for the moment.
Thank you very much. Indeed, a very interesting approach, and also interesting to see how it works on the ground. And I think the idea of providing a minimum wage so that also a worker has living wage, actually be able to afford everything else with their salary, which is not always the case in sectors where work is underpaid and undervalued. But since you mentioned imposing minimum wage, I would like to give the floor now to our unionists, Leena. But before doing that, I just want to remind you that you can interact with our speaker by asking questions on the YouTube channel or via the chat of the Zoom. So please do not hesitate to do so. We will collect them and ask them to our speakers right after. So Leena, first of all, what is going on in Finland? I hear there is some industrial actions currently going on, and it's not very usual in Finland to have strikes. So just to start, what is going on in Finland?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your presentations. It was interesting to hear Burgenland experience and about the minimum wage. Yes, we have a very unusual situation now in Finland because we are doing strike action in early childhood education and care, which has not been the case. I don't know when was the last strike. And this is only for private sector, because we have different collective agreements for public sector, which is now settled. It's a done deal, and now we are negotiating for the private sector early childhood education and care. And the fact is that the legislation is similar to public and private ECEC. I use the term ECEC. And the staffing requirements and the qualification requirements are similar to both public and private sector. But as a unionist, I must say that the problems mostly concern dealing with the staffing levels. We get the problems from the private sector. And I think it's about 80% provision in ECEC is public in Finland, and 20%, but this amount is growing, is 20% is private. So the majority of the problems are there, and the pay is lower, although the legislation is similar and the ratios are similar, qualifications requirements are similar. The private sector is paying less. So that's the, but I wasn't going to talk about collective agreements, because of course the pay is one thing, but I intended to talk about the quality. And I think the similar thing, every children need to be seen, heard, respected, valued, and taken into account. This similar facts affect the workers. All the workers, they need to be seen, heard, respected, valued, and taken into account, and their opinions need to be taken into account. And because the workers and the not only the teachers but the other qualified staff and other staff, they are the grassroots people who meet the children and can see the needs. They are the experts, and they should always be heard, and their opinions should be taken into account. This is not happening. This is the major problem, and it's not only the pay, but it to be seen, heard, respected, valued, and taken into account. This should be the fact, and it doesn't happen in Finland either. But my message is that, of course, the countries are very different, and it is very important to do research and do studies, because if we don't see the if we don't know the problem, we can't solve the problem. So that's why we need research and studies. And I'm happy that this study has been made. Thank you for that. I wanted to tell something about some results of our survey, because our union, the Finnish Union of Practical Nurses, SUPER, has about 6,000 to 7,000 practical nurses working as qualified. I don't know the exact term, but they are not teachers, but they have 3 years vocational upper secondary training at ECEC level 3 European qualification framework 4. So all our workers are very highly trained in Finnish ECEC. So we made a survey to our members, and some figures I would like to tell you, so that the very many of them, nearly half of them, so the response rate was very high. Yeah, we got over 2,000 responses, and now that there is an obligation for all the workers to do whistleblowing when there is when they see problems in the quality, for example, and if they do so, because it is their responsibility to do so, they answered that nearly half of them answered that no use of whistleblowing, because it doesn't show in quality improvements, and 10% responded that they had some negative counter measures, although they are illegal, but it happens. So nothing is done, and mostly these problems are connected with the lack of staffing, so staffing numbers. But what should I say? I should say that if we talk about equality, we can't talk about equality in ECEC. We need to talk about equality in the society, because this is not this is not a vacuum. So my message is that we need more research, and this is a good way ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think there is a common line, a red line here. You mentioned the fact that in private sector, despite the legislation and the collective agreement being similar, you have lower pay and therefore lower working conditions. We had Christian mentioning the fact that the outsourcing can sometimes bring into lower working conditions, lower salaries, but that also has an impact. I think it's coming out quite clearly. It has an impact on the quality, because if you have to cut, then you cut on the labor cost. And then Leena also mentioned the idea of not being heard, which I think very often when we talk about working conditions, we start off with wages, but then indeed the question is also you provide. It's a care job where you're not provided. You need to be listened to. You need to be able to implement what you learn on the ground, and you need to be recognized as such. And we see that women-dominated sector are very often undervalued. So for the same skills, and I think it was very important what Leena said, that for it's highly skilled professional, the teachers, but not only, also the other staff present in childcare is highly qualified, skilled and trained professionals that are not listened to, and they're not enabled to actually perform their jobs. Also, because if you create a divide into duration, and Leena, please now or later, if you want to come in a bit more on what is the quality, how do you define, and what's the impact on the quality of the service provided if you cut on personnel and staff shortages, that would be very interesting from us. I think what Rainer brought in on the aspect of reinvesting the profit. So the childcare being sort of, if I can say that, it's a sort of a right of the child to receive it. So therefore the service, the people must come before the profit. So you have to reinvest into the service to make sure that the quality is high instead of dividing to shareholders, which I think are all interesting points that are coming up. I think we had I had a pending question from before. Then we have already some questions from the audience that I invite to continue. We have the first, but I would like to go back first to what we were saying with Christian on the European new initiatives and how that can help solve a bit or not the issues that have been heard from the ground, both from the local government's perspective and the workers' perspective. And then if Rainer and Leena would like to react to Christian input.
Thank you. Probably not. I try to elaborate. We have, as we know, the resilience, recovery and resilience facility that is, probably the main financial tool that country had in decades to expand social service and other things, of course. So RFF allows countries to use these funds for expanding childcare, of course, because childcare is amongst the policies that are like structured to the social pillar, and of course we have European targets and so on and so forth. Number of countries responded. Give you some example. Italy, that is particularly lagging behind. They put 4.6 billion for that purpose from the RFF. Spain, we have example for Portugal, but also Germany, for instance, or Eastern country like Poland, Belgium, also Wallonian Brussels regions. So they all use, of course, Italy to a larger extent because it's also a large recipient, RFF funds to expand childcare. However, remember that what we talked about before, the main issue of the trilemma that the dilemma that I call trilemma, because it's about funding, accessibility, and quality, that especially local authority has pertains running cost of these services. However, the RFF funds are only for capital cost, meaning to create places like, create an infrastructure to put a childcare service into, or if you have already an infrastructure, refurbish the infrastructure and therefore make it appropriate for having a childcare service there. So that's the first problem, is for capital cost. You build and you create things. That is not for running cost. Some countries, like for instance Italy, Poland, or Spain, also use part of the RFF for the running cost of new places, but for a certain amount of time, couple of years only. When the RFF will be phased out, these funds will be phased out, and therefore municipalities will need to cover by themselves or through government transfer that funds for running cost. So another issue. So that's the first thing. The second problem is also that RFF, it's a lot of money in a very short term. And these are very complex service to put in place. Municipalities that did not do it in the past, they don't know basically how to do it, and they don't have these capacities. But they have to deliver in a very short term and deliver, service that they have. There are a lot of municipalities that they have to do it, and also then they have to manage the service, which is complicated if you want to have quality. So what's happening basically? Municipalities that they don't have enough funds, what we said before, maybe even if they receive to manage run the services, even if they will see that there will be some funds available, that will be only temporary. They don't have enough capacity, and they have to do applications for RFF in a very short time, in a very complex application. They basically renounce to these funds. We saw already in Italy 1,000 and something municipalities this is an estimate from the courts of auditors. Even if they have enough children and very low coverage, they did not apply because basically of this reason. The other possibility is that a municipality applies, take the money, build a place that they have no money to operationalize these places. And what they are going to do, they were going to give it to private. It's also possible that we are creating a huge flow of investments, public investments, that the end they will end up in basically contributing to expanding private provision. So that's the two things that is happening. And unless, maybe we can discuss what the European Union can do to avoid that, but I mean, I leave you with that. For the moment, what we are seeing is that, to answer your question, no, probably the RFF, even if it's a great opportunity, it has these issues about the running costs, especially, that will make up, eventually not benefiting the territory that should be benefited, and or expanding private and non-public services.
Thank you very much, Christian. This, I would say, a bit not very good looking outline of what our future may look like, but unfortunately very realistic. I think the question of really public investment, public money, taxpayers' money going to actually prepare the ground for private investment that could actually be very much profit making, because we don't know yet, because in Austria you have a system where the profit, it needs to be reinvested, but that is not the case across Europe. So that might actually go to the shareholders before then investing in qualities. But I would like to ask Rainer or Leena if they want to react to this, to the outlook presented by Christian.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, thank you. Yes, the RRF in Austria, unfortunately, there is at least no big portion foreseen for the childcare. And this has to do with it in principle. The federal government at the moment is not really very progressive in that respect when it comes to early childcare. We see this in some newly formed regional governments in Austria, like in Salzburg or in Lower Austria, where there would have been a lot of pressure to do more, invest more in that sense, and they ended up in not doing it. The region of Burgenland, which I have the honor to represent today, we are really quite progressive in that. It is in this, can see this in these minimum wages, which I already mentioned, and also when we have private companies or private initiatives who provide this service in some municipalities, we also try to get a kind of a grip on them in forcing them not to make big profits and to reinvest the money for that, and so we want to make sure that for a service which is, from our point of view, a really public service, not private companies profit from that. But I have to completely admit that it's also, when it comes to the financing, it's sometimes, of course, a bit difficult, because the regions in Austria, we don't have our own taxes or so we are dependent on the federal state. And in that sense, it's a very complicated system how the money is distributed. But in the end, the municipalities and the regions have to pay for that. And as I said, it is first of all a political priority which we give to that, and so far we can really say and say that it is a big success, and the municipalities are very happy that we have an approach in that way. And maybe also a reason why, which I can also say here, that our governor of Burgenland, Mr. Doskozil, was just in the weekend elected as the head of the Social Democratic Party for the federal Austria as well. But that's not the topic for now here. As I said, minimum wages is important, but we would also like to see more investment or more money from the federal state.
Thank you very much. Leena, would you like to add something, especially, I think, going back also a bit to the quality? So if we don't bring in enough money, and even European money is too complicated to get, or it's only temporary, does it impact the quality of the service?
Yeah, I need to start from the very old days. Already in 1970, we had legislation about ECEC in Finland, and then we had staffing ratios and qualifications level stated in 70s. And the private provision is very new phenomena. I think it was only a few years we have had, 10, 15 years we have had some private provision. And it means, because there is same legislation and same qualifications requirements, public money is running into the profit-making enterprises, and some of them are multinational companies, which is of course problematic. And I can say from my experience and from the experience of my union colleagues that the quality problems are more often, they happen in private enterprises, because their interest is not the same as in public provision. So that is my experience from my union work, 28 years in this union, and some of them working also in EPSU working groups. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a question from the audience. I will read it out. Is there any way to improve childcare and early education through more flexible labor policies or informal childcare, or just through formal and private enterprise? Is it over-institutionalized? Which I think here the person, Emma, is referring to whether we can have a diversity of service provision in terms of formal childcare, but also childminding or other forms of childcare provision. I assume that is it, because from a union's perspective, flexibilizing on working conditions might not be something that we would look forward to. Anyone would like to react? Christian, you'd like to react? Please go ahead.
Yes, I mean, it's strongly not advisable to do so for a number of reasons. If your main interest is the best interest of the child and of the families, meaning if you conceive that as the building block, as Laeticia said very clearly, of the education pattern of the children, because it is, so it should be of high quality, and in order to have an impact, but quality also means that the service are organized in the way that facilitate the relations with the parents and communication with the parents, and therefore not only to allow women to work, but also to have a real reconciliation, and fathers too. That can only happen if you have, that's a standard empirical analysis. I mean, it's a science. If you do it on center-based formal. Informal childminding have not these characteristics for obvious reason. It's like if you do like the home education, for primary education, it's very similar if you want. Private can exist. I can admit that because it's the same with the education. However, they have to follow strict and very strict rules in terms of quality. Some countries have developed something like that, but it means basically that the public have to finance that. So if the public have to finance the private in order to follow the strict rule, why don't you finance directly the public? That is my suggestion. Anyway.
Thank you very much. Leena or Rainer would like also to reply on this point. Yes, Leena, I see your mic open. Please.
Yes, I totally agree with Christian. I really agree. And of course, the countries are very different. If I answer Emma. So for Finland, I wouldn't recommend more flexible labor policies, because it's I don't know what you mean by flexible, because it's always we are very different. In Finland, women work full time. We have been working full time since 50s when we started to pay debt to Russia. So we work full time. Children attend full time easy on the average. So and it's very we have good legislation concerning that. So of course, flexibility would be sometimes good. But the one thing I need to say about our survey made this year. So about working conditions, the main reason that workers, trained, qualified practical nurses or teachers' assistants or whatever you call them in ECEC, they nearly 80% have intentions to leave the profession. And the main reason is ethical burden, which mean that staffing levels are so low that they don't have time enough to, meet the children's need, and they don't have time to, for example, under the 3 years old, they need the lap, they need the to be in somebody's arms. They don't need to have the education in like at school, but they need to be taken care of. So this ethical burden is so high that that's the main reason why they want to leave the profession, and that's alarming. So there needs to be more qualified adults taken care of, also younger children, not only educating over 3 years old, but so the staff knows what the children need, and now they are seeing that I don't have time enough to take care of the children in my group. So 80%, it's very high. Last time we made a survey, it was much less. It was about 40%, but now it's nearly doubled. It's alarming. So the time, free time for children to play, and enough time for workers to do the work they know how to do. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I see the time is running. We only have 1 or 2 minutes left. So unless anybody else would like to add something else, Rainer, if you wanted to add something else, please jump in at any moment right now. Christian, you're nodding. Does it mean you want to say something?
Yeah, just to have a
Yes.
little hope, because it seems that here, the things are very on the RFF issue. I mean, there is a couple of things the European Union can do. For instance, recognizing the fact that you're giving, money for capital cost, and therefore you should be flexible in terms of running costs. So, for instance, thinking about the qualified treatment under the revisited fiscal rules, this is something that is under discussion. So I'm not saying, the impossible here. So many Minister of Finance are, thinking now of these policies investment, and therefore potentially, being more flexible in terms of the fiscal rules for municipality to spend. And that will be, a great recognition. So you say, you give the money for capital cost, also allow you to spend a bit in order to run properly. The second thing that can do, I see, very concretely, is to help municipalities to increase their capacities on doing these things. So you have an incredible example. I mean, I just mentioned, for instance, if you want Reggio Emilia in Italy, or in Germany, Berlin, there are cities and regions that did incredible work recognized worldwide that can help other cities and regions, to increase. Thanks to also a support from the European Union. Data are fundamental, but last but not least, we really need, in my view, I don't know if the others agree, a recommendation of the workforce on that. You see, in the care strategy and other strategy, they talk about the workforce only in terms of qualification. There's nothing about, salary condition, working conditions, a very heavy type of work. We really need a recommendation at European level, giving recognition to these people that they do a job that is incredibly important, considered as a building block for education and also for labor and other opportunities. So we probably need a European initiative on that, I hope that the others agree with that.
Yeah, maybe I jump in for
have
It's
1
okay,
minute
Paola?
left. We only have
Yeah,
1 minute left.
Yeah,
So
okay. Just
30
I
seconds to
just
you,
want to
30
say,
seconds to
yeah,
me.
because I also just want to say that I agreed with what was just said by Leena and Christian. And of course, because I was talking about a lot of minimum wages, but it's not only the money which makes a job attractive and which is good for working condition. We need the money, okay, but we also need this recognition that they are doing a great job. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I think it's a perfect conclusion also to say recognition. And I think the ethical burden that Leena was mentioning, it is not a job that you do lightly. You do a job with a passion. You do a job because you believe in it, and you're believing that you're giving children a chance for a better future for their development. So I think the red line here, yes to investment. We can use the European funds, but I would totally agree with you, they are an investment, and public investment should be falling on citizens and children, parents, their families, the society. It should not fall into the pockets of the shareholders. And in that sense, we really need to make sure that there is enough investment. And if enough investment is there, enough staff is there with good working conditions, we wouldn't need to diversify that much. We would just have enough resources to actually make sure that every child in Europe and every parent in Europe have what they deserve as a right. And indeed, if supporting totally a recommendation on on good working conditions, let's go a bit beyond fair. I mean, fair is okay, but I think workers here deserve good working conditions because they do deliver a good and extremely important service for the community and the society. And that's only the payback that we owe them for the work they do every day. So unfortunately, we're out of time. We're already 1 minute too long. But I would like to thank again all our discussants, all our speakers, Laeticia, Feps, and Fes for co-organizing this event, Rainer, Christian, and Leena for attending. Thank you very much. I hope this was an interesting event for you all, and a different lunch break. Thank you very much, and see you soon for the next event of the Care for Care series. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.